Hello, it's Bishop Mark. Today is Luke chapter 23, verses 50 to 56. And we finish with chapter 23 today. Chapter 23 was about the death of Jesus, and this last passage is about his burial. So it's important to know about the timing. It explains a lot for this paragraph and what happened. So the timing, we know that Jesus was arrested at 2 in the morning. He was brought before the high priest, and then before the Sanhedrin, and then before Pilate, and then before Herod, and back to Pilate. All that took a while. It took the day, and then he was nailed to the cross and carried that cross to Golgotha, where he was placed upon the cross. Now, we know from Luke that he was on the cross from noon to 3 p.m. And at 3 p.m., he died. Now, we have to remember that this was a Friday. The Sabbath begins at evening, so 6 p.m. begins the Sabbath. And we've talked before about what the Jews can do during the Sabbath. Remember, they can't work at all. They can't do anything that resembles work. And they set aside the day to rest and pray. But no Jew would do anything resembling work after 6 p.m. on Friday. Now, to bury a body, to prepare the body and bring it to a tomb would be forbidden. It would have to be done before 6 p.m. So, that's the rush. You can see how things are done fast and in a rush. It's because nothing can happen after 6 p.m. Okay, now let's read. Now, Luke first begins introducing Joseph of Arimathea. So I'm going to read those two verses of who is Joseph of Arimathea. Now there was a virtuous and righteous man named Joseph, who, though he was a member of the council, had not consented to their plan of action. He came from the Jewish town of Arimathea and was awaiting the kingdom of God. So we hear about Joseph of Arimathea. Joseph of Arimathea was a member of the Sanhedrin. Remember, Jesus was before the Sanhedrin. The elders, and most of them are Sadducees. In other words, they're also wealthy. So they're wealthy leaders of Jerusalem. Now, the Sanhedrin, they convinced the high priest Caiaphas. And they tried to convince Pilate, but Pilate wasn't convinced. And then he was sent to Herod and sent back to Pilate, and Pilate declared him innocent, but they did not want to hear that. And it was the Sanhedrin that overwhelmed Pilate, and he gave in. We've talked about that. Well, Joseph was a member who didn't agree with him. I wonder how many other members of the Sanhedrin did not participate. Joseph was a good Jewish man who awaited the kingdom. So he was awaiting the Messiah, and he obviously recognized Jesus as the Messiah. So isn't it interesting that this Joseph came forward at this time? Let's see what he did. He went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. That's kind of a gutsy thing to do, with the angry Sanhedrin, to be a member of them who asked for the body. And Pilate obviously granted it to him. Now, what happens to the body of those crucified? Normally, the thieves, the criminals, those bodies are thrown away. There is a place in between, again, the mountains in Jerusalem area, Mount of Olives, Mount Jerusalem. There's the Kidron Valley where all the Jews are buried, right? And then if you keep going around the mountain, there's another one. in that area, there's a place called Gehenna. Jesus refers to hell as like Gehenna. It's where they throw the trash. And that's where the body would have been deposited to be rot and be eaten by jackals. Sorry for the image, but they meant nothing, the criminals. They were just thrown out. So, who knows what the apostles or the women would have done, but Joseph of Arimathea stepped forward. He asked Pilate for the body, and then he went to collect the body at the cross. I wonder how much time that took, to prove that he had the right to the body with whatever Pilate gave him. To gather the body, okay, but Jesus died upon the cross at 3. They have to take him down. They have to do all this. So what time is it now? Remember, everything has to be done before 6 p.m. Okay, we'll continue. After he had taken the body down, he wrapped it in a linen cloth and laid him in a rough-hewn tomb in which no one had yet been buried. Okay. So, Joseph of Arimathea, a member of the Sanhedrin, was the one that buried Jesus. Now, before we talk about that, let's recap now. Do you remember how Luke has a whole bunch of people point out that Jesus is innocent? First, he has a good thief. He has Pilate. He has the centurion. Well, now he has Joseph of Arimathea, a member of the Sanhedrin, obviously not agreeing with the guilty verdict, and therefore another one to declare him innocent. Now, Joseph had a new tomb, a roughly hewn. It was just carved out. And what the tombs were in those days, they were outside of Jerusalem, and they were places to put the body while it disintegrated, right? So a tomb was a temporary place. The body goes in, it stays there until it is simply bones and things, and then they take the bones and things and they bury them elsewhere, often in the Kidron Valley. So if they're a man of his prominence. But these were places of waiting, so there'd be something drawn out in the rock, and the body would be placed on a kind of a ledge, and a stone would be rolled over the door. Now, this too has to be done quickly. The tomb is near to the cross, right? So carrying the body there was not a really long place. They're both, you can see them to this day where they are. They're close to each other. But there was no time to prepare the body, right? So Joseph of Arimathea and the women that followed, their plan was to just cover the body, put him in the tomb, and then close the door. And then after the Sabbath was over, to come and prepare the body. That's why Jesus is wrapped in a shawl, in a cloth, the shroud, and the cloth would be from his toes up around his head to the back of his feet. It covered him. It was a long cloth for burial, but they didn't wrap him in it. They just covered him over, and they put it in, and they put him in the tomb as fast as they could before 6 p.m. Now that shroud, as I've told you before, which I'm 100% believer in, which has evidence of the resurrection we'll talk about, but nevertheless, it has a lot of evidence of all the wounds of Christ, and all the blood is on that shroud to this day. But why was it there? Why was it on the burial cloth? Because they did not have time to prepare his body with the proper washing and oils and all that. Couldn't be done. They got him in before the 6 p.m. deadline. They shut the door, which is more work. And they obviously just did it on time. They didn't even have a chance to wipe him down. So that's why that shroud to this day has the evidence of all the blood and all the wounds of Christ. Okay, so Joseph of Arimathea, how wonderful that he stepped forward, surrounded the body in the cloth, and placed him in the tomb. It was the day of preparation, and the Sabbath was about to begin. So, I've explained that. The women who had come from Galilee with him followed behind. When they had seen the tomb and the way in which his body was laid in it, they returned and prepared spices and perfumed oil. So the women, obviously includes Mary of Magdala, the women from Galilee. There's the people that followed Jesus from Galilee. Luke had said they were at a distance, and then they followed Joseph to make sure they knew which tomb it was in. Now that's very important for the witness, right? Because after Jesus rose to the dead, they said he was never in the tomb, or they said they stole his body, but the women are witnesses to the fact that Joseph of Arimathea put him in that particular tomb. And they knew exactly where it was, and they prepared the perfumes and spices so that they would come back after the Sabbath, have someone open the door, I don't know how hard it was, and they were prepared to wash and prepare his body after. Then they rested on the Sabbath, according to the commandment. Jesus and his followers were obedient Jewish people, and they obeyed the Sabbath. And so, something happened in between. We know what that is. Before they had a chance to open up that shroud and prepare him, Jesus rose from the dead. And so we're going to speak about that in the next chapter, which is the final chapter of Luke, chapter 24. Peace.